Thanks very much, Steph. Hi everyone. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this short presentation about one of our recent community outreach projects, which was using maritime heritage to combat isolation within the military veterans community. This project, the Aberlady X-Craft project, was funded by the National Lottery Community Fund in Scotland and was designed to use maritime heritage to bring military veterans together safely during the COVID-19 pandemic and train them in historical research and archaeological research while combating isolation. Veterans, particularly those who are wounded, injured or sick, which includes a wide variety of mental health conditions, are a group vulnerable to isolation, depression and anxiety. The use of heritage to engage and support veterans who are experiencing or are vulnerable to such conditions has been pioneered by the Operation Nightingale team at the Defence Infrastructure Organisation, who have conducted a number of excavations and surveys on areas of the MOD's estate across the UK, as well as organisations such as Waterloo Uncovered and support groups like Breaking Ground Heritage, who we work with on this project as well. However, with the advent of COVID-19 and the restrictions we all experienced over the last 18 months, active participation in field projects for veterans became either impossible or extremely difficult. Given that it takes a great deal of courage and effort for individuals who are already feeling isolated and closed off to put themselves forward to come on projects, the additional barriers from COVID meant that only a handful of field projects were able to operate during 2020. At the same time, the restrictions to protect us all from COVID had shut down many other avenues of interaction for veterans, leaving them even more vulnerable and even more isolated than before. This project, therefore, was designed to bring together individuals remotely using an archaeological site that would be interesting to them as a vehicle for building friendships and developing skills in the same way that going on excavations does. The project was additionally designed to complete survey work on an archaeological asset which was at risk due to coastal erosion and climate change. And these are the World War II mini submarine X-Craft wrecks in Aberlady Bay in East Lothian. The X-Craft were mini submarines developed by the Royal Navy during World War II for conducting covert and dangerous missions in locations where normal sized submarines could not go. They had a crew of 3 to 4 and were only 10 meters long and 2 meters wide, so a very cramped and claustrophobic situation for all involved. The X-Craft were used on a raid on the Tirpitz in 1943, as well as raids on harbours and communication lines and as signal vessels during the commando landings on D-Day. The examples in Aberlady Bay are both thought to be XT versions of the X-Craft, with the T standing for training. These originally 6 training vessels were made, and they were based at Port Bannatyne on Bute during the latter years of the war. The first phase of the project, therefore, involved completing an updated conditions survey and photogrammetric survey of the 2 wrecks, taking this opportunity to train some of the volunteers in this process in a COVID-secure way. We had also hoped to complete some drone flights over the wrecks, but as it's a local nature reserve and the 4th overall is a Ramsar and a triple SI, we required permission from Nature Scotland, and unfortunately at this point in the year the overwintering birds had arrived, and so we couldn't fly without disturbing them. Nevertheless, thanks to the use of pole photography, the survey managed to get some overhead photos and it was a success, and the 3D models of the wrecks can be seen over the next few slides. The Sketchfab links are already there, and they can be seen on the Wessex Archaeology Sketchfab page as well. So the eastern wreck here is a lot more broken up than the western wreck. The bow is towards the left of the screen there, and the very badly disintegrated stone is towards the left. It's lying on its port side, and as you can see, a lot of it has been damaged and moved away. The 2 wrecks were attached to a concrete anchor, which is actually 3 anti-tank blocks, which are still present in between the wrecks, and they were used in ammunition trials in 1946 by the Naval Construction Research Establishment, which was based at Rosyth. The two X-Craft were attacked by aircraft, a Mosquito and a Seafire, carrying both armour-piercing and high explosive rounds to see the effect of these 2 types of munitions on submarine armour. The trials were successful, as the continued presence of the X-Craft demonstrates, with the results demonstrating that the high explosive rounds were more effective at causing damage. This information would inform some of the early Cold War anti-submarine tactics for coastal command. So prior to this work, the wrecks had only had brief surveys by the Archaeological Diver Unit in 1994, Guard Archaeology's Rapid Coastal Zone Assessment for the Southern Forth coastline in 1995, 2 quick walkovers by ARCAMS in 2004 and 2006, and a training survey by Alison Fuller-Shapcock in 2004 on the western wreck, but the eastern wreck was not surveyed at that time either. So they've had some sort of overview surveys, but nothing too in depth. The western wreck is considerably more intact than the eastern one, but still breaking apart, with more of the hull material surviving and some evidence for the hydroplane and rudder controls at the stern. It still shows the amount of material that has been lost over the last 75 years. As this wreck was surveyed in detail with accompanying photographs in 2004 by Alison Fuller-Shapcock as part of her Nautical Archaeological Society training, we've been able to do a bit more of a comparison of how much it's broken down in the last 15 years. It's clear that the upper works, the thinner material that's not the pressure hull, more of that has disappeared, particularly around the hatch covers and periscope dome, and a lot of more of the hydroplane and rudder controls are now missing and have been removed by probably tidal action and wave action in the last 15 years compared to how it was in 2004. It's also clear that the sediment deposits around the wrecks do change and do move about. In 2004, more of this wreck was covered than now, and there's now a large scour hole along the starboard side of the wreck. And so more material is exposed to water, air, and wind, and more material is starting to break down and is available to be broken down as opposed to being covered in sediment. The condition of the wrecks have clearly deteriorated in the last 20 years. Some salvage is also likely to be taking place probably in the mid-20th century. Neither wreck has their Gardner diesel engines in place, and the complete removal of large sections of the pressure hull, thicker steel around the engine compartment suggests the section being cut away to remove the engine components. So the updated surveys we'd completed had time to complete accurate measurements of the hulls, identify the parts of the submarines that were present and those that were not, and conclude that the previous identification of the wrecks as XT versions was correct. It also demonstrated that comparing the 2004 results to the current ones, that near complete structural collapse of the wrecks is likely in the next 10 or so years due to their exposed nature and the general condition of the materials there. So having completed the surveys, it was now time to gather our group of veteran volunteers, discuss the overall project, and then put together a pack of information and resources to help them design and begin their own research projects. A number of interested people immediately came forward with ideas for their own projects, having been inspired by the stories of the X-craft, while others had ideas that were linked more to their personal and family histories. We also, having completed work on the South East Scotland Regional Research Framework, we were able to offer rough topic ideas and areas where we knew research would be valuable and allow the individuals to develop those into their own ideas. So the project ideas that came out of this from the veterans were research into the medical conditions that affected submariners during World War II, developing a guided walk of the coastal defences of the Forth, researching the use of the X-craft in the Far East and completing a crew biography of one of the missions, research into the sinking of HMS Glorious by a descendant of one of the crew, building an accurate scale model of an X-craft and then using that to compare it to the wrecks themselves, collating and researching the Fred Bown archive and investigating the loss of submarines K4 and K17 in the Battle of May Island, and survey and research of starfish decoy sites within Yorkshire and Merseyside. Quite an important part of the project was not just to build friendships and develop contacts between those taking parts, but also to establish links and contacts with other heritage, volunteer and professional organisations, as well as developing the research skills and potential of the participants. The wide variety of projects meant that a variety of organisations were brought in to assist the veterans, and we're very grateful to the time and efforts that they made. As we'll see, it was a success of the project that participants were able to give back in some way to many of those organisations, either in terms of donating their creations or in terms of providing their research documents for inclusion to archives. While not all the projects were taken through to completion, mostly due to the volunteers realising they did not have time to complete the work or moving away from the area they were studying, 5 of the projects were completed. So 2 of the projects that the X-craft survey inspired were to investigate and record decoy bombing sites known as starfish sites, which were close to the homes of 2 of the veterans, one in Merseyside and one in Yorkshire. Starfish sites were built in open areas in the wider vicinity of important industrial complexes or urban areas, and used patterns of troughs of burning oil to confuse nighttime bombing raids into attacking the starfish site rather than the actual target. Mike spent a day doing preliminary photo surveys of one in Formby, which was designed to imitate Liverpool docks, and began the process of investigating whether any evidence of bombing was present within the area. He wasn't having a lot of luck with that until an unexploded bomb was washed up on Formby Beach and then destroyed by the MOD bomb team suggesting that there was at least some bombing in that area. Unfortunately, due to work commitments, this was as far as this project got. However, Mike remained involved in discussing other projects and providing general encouragement and support throughout to other volunteers. Harry, who was investigating the Starfish sites around York, moved house a couple of months into the project, and so instead joined his brother Jack in investigating the Fred Bown archive. We presented the work completed by Jack and Harry on the Fred Bown archive in the Archaeological Research in Progress online conference earlier this year. To briefly surmise, Fred Bown was an early submariner with the Royal Navy just before and during the First World War, serving in a number of different types of submarines, including the K-class submarine K-17, which was one of those lost during the Battle of May Island in early 1918, which was a training series of training accidents rather than an actual battle. The archive of his service was the catalyst for Jack and Harry to further investigate his role in the earlier years of the Naval Submarine Service, covering deployments in the Baltic, supporting Russian forces, which are poorly known about more widely. A general report into the contents of the archive and Fred's service has been completed, and we are in the process of publishing it. The remains of K-17 and her sister submarine K-4 are within the wider survey area of the Nurt-Naguia offshore wind farm. These wrecks are protected, and the surveys that we are looking at here were completed to ensure the wind farm designers were able to avoid them with the turbine locations and inter-array cables. Our involvement with this offshore archaeological mitigation project enabled us to bring this incredibly high definition survey data kindly provided by the NNG team to Harry and Jack to further investigate Fred's time on K-17. When combined with the eyewitness reports in the archives and Fred's own archive, a series of dive videos available online, and with our own knowledge of wrecks, the team were able to reassess the events of that fatal night and the reason why the two submarines sank. The results of this work have been published through the Wessex Archaeology website and have also been passed on to the Salvage and Marine Operations Department of the MOD. Lisa, who is a Royal Navy veteran, completed a fact-finding project on X-Craft, which included visiting X-24, which is the only surviving midget X-Craft, which is in the Submarine Museum in Gosport. In addition, she also conducted a literature review of published research into the medical problems experienced by British submariners during World War II. She describes it as fascinating. Not surprisingly, a life on board a World War II submarine was hazardous. Her report has been added to the archive in the Institute of Naval Medicine in Gosport, and since then Lisa has taken part in a number of other heritage projects, including those organised by Operation Nightingale. And that's a quote from her about how she felt about the project there. And Sean, a Royal Navy veteran as well, was keen to investigate the service careers and lives of the X-Craft crews themselves. Having looked into the subject area, he found the missions in the European theatre had been gone over quite comprehensively, but the small number of missions completed by adapted XE craft in the Far East in 1945 offered him a more challenging project. He brought together archive material on Operation Struggle, which was the attempt to sink two Japanese heavy cruisers in the Johor Strait, along with the published material of the archives and the published memoirs of those involved, and brought the sources together to form this report here. This, along with his volunteering on a number of archaeological excavations over the past 3 or 4 years, has inspired Sean to undertake an undergraduate degree in archaeology, which he began in September 2021. The scale model of the X-Craft was completed by David, another highlight of the project. As the model slowly took shape, David provided photo updates and small associated pieces of research to the project Facebook page, as well as sharing several model makers' secrets in recreating parts of the model which the original model had missed. Once the model was complete to a similar point where the wrecks are, so that they didn't have the saddle mines on the side of it, but had all the hull and external fittings were in place, David brought it to our graphics team, who ran it through an artifact scanner. And while they were working on the 3D model of that, David put the scale model into a dockside diorama with a repair crew working on the sub as the skipper looks on. David has chosen to donate the diorama to the Aberlady History and Conservation Society for their museum in the village in recognition of their help and support of the project. The 3D model created by the artifact scanner was then overlaid onto the 3D models of the wrecks to demonstrate quite how much material has been lost from each one. This simple graphic output really brings out how much material has gone, as well as showing what the surviving parts are. This comparison formed part of the video material for a discussion on the project on the Society for Nautical Research's Mariner's Mirror podcast with Dr. Sam Willis, which also contained a longer video running through the full model outlining the layout of the craft. So as part of the project, Breaking Ground Heritage completed mental health evaluations of the participants before and after the project, as they do for all the veterans projects they're involved in. As with previous projects, the results demonstrated that participating in the project meant statistically significant improvements in general well-being and, importantly, reductions in anxiety, isolation and depression. We know that these have proved true in-person events such as excavations and survey projects, but this is the first time that we are aware of that a remote/online project has been demonstrated to have the same effect for people. While this route was only necessary due to the practicalities of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there are clear advantages to moving back to in-person events and projects, there are also advantages in maintaining a level of remote and online interaction too. It's more accessible for those further away from the excavations and those with access restrictions as well. So we hope to continue to bring a blended form of these projects in the future to continue to support those at risk of poor mental health and assist with their recovery. And I'd just like to say thank you very much to everybody who's been involved in the project, all the Aberlady project volunteers who've been fantastic and helped support each other and given me a good lot of laughs over the last year or so, to all the organisations who supported the volunteers and ourselves, National Lottery Community Fund Scotland for funding the project, Claire Engall, who is the Engall offshore lead, Dickie Bennett at Breaking Ground Heritage for his help, and my colleagues Chris, Andy, Dan, Tim and Robin at Wessex, and Katie Hutton, who is now at Headland but was at Wessex when we did the survey. Thank you all very much.